So, yeah, this is gonna sound fake as hell, but here it goes. I'm 41M, the newly elected pope. Not kidding. After the previous pope suddenly stepped down for health reasons, the conclave met. And, well, long story short, I was chosen. The twist? I'm not Italian. I'm not even European. I'm Korean-American, born in LA, moved to Seoul in my 20s, and I've been working within the church structure ever since. The first non-European pope in centuries. First married pope in the modern era, thanks to a whole reform effort that I won't bore you with, unless you really want to talk canon law. And yes, South Korea is now the new center of the Vatican. People were calling it a new era. Progressive. Bold. Some called it sacrilegious. I was just trying not to throw up. My wife, Hyojin, 39F, had always been this charming, whip-smart woman who could win a room in 30 seconds flat. We met when I was still a bishop, and she worked as a theology professor at a Jesuit university in Busan. At least, that's what she told me. Looking back, a lot of things don't add up, but I'll get to that. When I got the call that I was being considered for the papacy, she seemed excited. A little too excited. Kept saying weird things like, now people will really listen to us. And this is just the beginning. At first, I chalked it up to nerves. Or pride. But then, other things started slipping through the cracks. Little lies. Things I never questioned before. I'd ask her where she was, and she'd say, oh, just getting lunch with an old friend. But the restaurant would be closed on that day. Or she'd claim she was in a meeting, but I'd hear a train in the background. One time, I even found a receipt for a hotel minibar tucked into one of her coats. She said it was from a conference in Busan that she never told me about. I didn't want to believe anything bad. I mean, we were literally living in the Vatican Embassy in Seoul. I was the freaking pope. What would people say if they knew the Holy Father's wife was acting sketchy as hell? I kept it to myself. For a while. But man, something deep in my gut was off. And yeah, that's just the start. Okay, so here's where things start to really spiral. I'd like to say I discovered the truth through prayer or divine inspiration or something poetic like that. But no, it was way more mundane. She left her tablet on our shared desk in the private residence. Yeah, the one right behind the papal chapel. I wasn't snooping, I swear. It pinged. I glanced over. Just a message preview. From a contact named JS, work. Except it didn't read like work. It said, last night was divine. Can't stop thinking about you in that robe winking face. My heart stopped. Divine? Robe? I'm the one who wears the damn robes in this house. So I tapped in. I know. Bad move. But at that point, curiosity wasn't just killing the cat. It was clawing its way through the sanctified marble of my soul. There were dozens of messages. JS wasn't her co-worker. He was some entrepreneur turned philosophical influencer who did TEDx talks about God being a blockchain or something insane like that. And my wife? She was not only messaging him, she was sending pictures. Of her. In our bedroom. In my papal bedroom. I think I actually gagged. Like full-on, hand over mouth, almost threw up gagged. There were texts about how tired she was of being seen as the Pope's wife, and how this guy saw her for who she really was. One message even said, he's so naive. You'd think someone with the keys to the church would be better at locking the doors. I slammed the tablet shut and just sat there, shaking. The cross on my desk caught my eye, and for a weird second, I found myself apologizing to it. Like it was my fault. What the hell was happening? And more importantly, what the hell was I supposed to do next? So I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I stayed in the private chapel staring at the crucifix like I was trying to channel some kind of divine clarity. But all I felt was hollow. Just this cold, gnawing hollowness where trust used to be. Morning comes. She strolls in wearing my hoodie, with her hair up like nothing happened. Like she wasn't texting softcore poetry to a wannabe prophet named JS. I'm not a yeller by nature. I'm a priest by trade. My whole job is literally not losing my temper in public. But the moment I saw her, I said, dead serious, who the hell is JS? She froze. Visibly. Like a bad actor in a low-budget drama. Her eyes flicked left before her mouth opened. First sign of a lie. She said, what? Oh, he's just a theology consultant I met during that seminar last year. We're working on a paper together. I said nothing. Just handed her the tablet. It was still open to one of the messages where she sent him a mirror selfie in my robe. And his response, you look so holy, I'd sin twice. Her whole face changed. She didn't even try to deny it after that. Just rolled her eyes and dropped the fakest line I've ever heard. Fine. We were just talking. You know I've been lonely. You're so busy with the church. With God. I needed someone who actually sees me. That someone who sees me line hit harder than any slap. Like our entire marriage was suddenly a side quest she didn't feel like finishing. I asked her, point blank. Did you sleep with him? She scoffed, actually scoffed, and said, Does it matter? You basically took a vow of celibacy the moment you put that white robe on. You're married to the church now. That broke something in me. Like a stained glass window shattering from the inside. I stood there, wearing the ring of Peter, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my entire life. And she just walked out. Like I had done something wrong. After she walked out, I just stood there. I was holding the tablet like it was a loaded weapon. And honestly, it was. You don't understand. This wasn't just a marriage problem. This was a global scandal waiting to happen. I'm the Pope. The freaking Pope. I don't get to have a cheating wife. I don't get to have any wife, according to the traditionalists. And if the world found out my first lady of the church was sneaking around with a spiritual influencer who sells premium soul alignment crystals online, the fallout would be nuclear. So I did what any reasonable man in an unreasonable position would do. I went into full damage control mode. I started digging, not out of paranoia, but because if you find one lie, there's probably 10 more hiding behind it like demons under a cassock. First bombshell? Haijin never actually worked for that Jesuit university in Busan. I emailed a former colleague from there, discreetly, and he said she gave a guest lecture once, but she was never on staff. Never held a theology degree. Her master's thesis? Fake. Like, AI-generated nonsense. I confronted her again later that day, calmly, because now I was past rage. I was in that numb, surgical headspace you enter when you're doing something awful that has to be done. She didn't even blink. Okay, she said. So maybe I lied about a few things. But everyone lies to get ahead, especially in the church. Look where it got you. I stared at her for what felt like hours. I asked, was any of it real? And she laughed. Not out of amusement, out of contempt. You were always looking for a holy woman. I just gave you the costume. I swear, in that moment, I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or pray. I did none of the above. I left. Just walked out of our residence and into the garden behind the apostolic nunciature. I sat on a bench near a statue of St. Peter, who died upside down on a cross. I finally understood why. I was starting to get the horrible feeling that this wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated, and it was going to get worse. So by now, I'm thinking this isn't just infidelity. This is espionage, or at the very least, a plot twist from a soap opera written by someone on LSD. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to Father Luca, my oldest friend in the church. Italian. Jesuit. Knows where all the skeletons are buried, and probably blessed most of them. I trusted him with my life. He was one of the only people who had raised an eyebrow when I married Haijin 5 years ago. He answered in a whisper like he was already in confession. I told him everything. The texts. The fake job. The robe selfie. And the part that scared me most, that this wasn't just a cheating scandal. His response? Brother. She was mentioned. Months ago. In whispers. Whispers. The Vatican is always full of whispers. Apparently, Haijin had been flagged by a small internal circle in Rome for unusual access. Someone had reported she'd requested internal church documents through my credentials. Stuff about relics, global Catholic properties, and even papal voting history. I never gave her access. At least, not knowingly. But she had sat next to me during all the transition chaos. Maybe she glanced over passwords. Maybe she heard me talking. Maybe I left a file open. Then Lucas says, there are rumors she's involved with a shadow org trying to destabilize church leadership, specifically the modernizers. That includes you, by the way. I laughed. Like, loud enough that one of the nuns walking by the chapel actually flinched. So what? My wife is a religious double agent. Luca didn't laugh. Maybe not an agent, but useful to them. Charismatic. Smart. Untethered to truth. That makes her dangerous. It hit me like a psalm to the face. I was never the mission. I was the means. She married a bishop with potential. Rode the reformist wave. Sold herself as a symbol of new Catholic femininity. And now that I'd reached the top, she had what she needed. All I had left was the title. The robe. The empty bed. and the growing realization that I was probably being watched by more than just God. So now I'm paranoid. I mean, really paranoid. I always thought the papal apartments were secure. Bulletproof windows. 24/7 Swiss Guard. Rooms swept for bugs. But when your wife might be leaking holy secrets to some fringe cult or ideological faction, you start seeing threats in the incense smoke. That night, I went full spy thriller mode. Told my secretary I needed to fast and pray alone for 24 hours. Standard papal excuse. Nobody asks questions. I locked myself in the private study, shut the lights off, and just sat in the dark with my laptop and my phone. I started tracing everything. Email logins, device history, security camera timestamps. She'd accessed my office while I was in Rome last month. Claimed she was organizing my vestments. But logs showed she printed nearly 50 documents. Property deeds, financial statements, even a private letter I wrote to the Archbishop of Nairobi. I confronted her again. Quietly. Carefully. Did you steal church documents? She didn't even flinch. Just looked at me with this condescending smirk and said, "Is it stealing if it's my future too?" She went on a rant about how the church owes transparency, how I was becoming just another figurehead, how she was collecting insurance in case things turned south. Insurance? I asked her directly. Are you working with someone? Are you being paid? She rolled her eyes and walked out again. But before she did, she dropped this nuclear line. You're so concerned with your flock, you forgot you married a wolf. I sat down, literally just dropped into the nearest chair. It felt like all the air got sucked out of the room. This wasn't about sex anymore. This was betrayal in its purest form, not just of our marriage, of me, my name, my mission, my faith. That night, I slept in the papal panic room. Yeah, that's a real thing. It's under the residence, reinforced steel, air filter, basic supplies, no windows. It's meant for when terrorists try something stupid. Now it's where the Pope goes to cry because his wife might be running a religious psyop. I sat there for hours, staring at the crucifix on the wall, wondering, what the hell does forgiveness even look like when the knife's still in your back? So, 3 days after the panic room sleepover, I get a call from the Apostolic Nuncio to Japan. Nice guy, bit of a gossip. He sounds tense, more than usual. He says, Your Holiness, there's chatter that you're planning to resign. Excuse me, what? I nearly dropped my coffee. Apparently, someone sent a leaked memo to multiple Asian dioceses suggesting I was considering stepping down due to mental strain and spiritual misalignment. And get this, it was written in my style, my phrases, my digital signature. I never wrote that memo. So now I'm pacing around like a heretic at a relic auction. I check my email, my secure line. There's no trace of the memo on my end, but it got passed around like incense at Easter. A few bishops even responded sympathetically, saying things like, Whatever path you choose, we support you in prayer. Are you kidding me? I put 2 and 2 together fast. This was her. She had access. She had my voice, my writing cadence, even my secure login from that one time she helped clean up my inbox. But the question wasn't how she did it, it was why. What was the endgame here? I cornered her in the residence kitchen. The staff had cleared out, thank God. I didn't even raise my voice. Just held up a printed copy of the fake resignation memo and asked, Why are you doing this? She took one look, smiled softly, and said, Because you were never supposed to last. You weren't chosen for who you are, you were chosen to fail differently. Then she turned and walked away. Again. Like she had just dropped a final boss monologue and faded into the next level. I stood there in silence, staring at the tiles. I felt like the room was tilting. This wasn't just a betrayal anymore. It was sabotage. Calculated. Strategic. Personal. I wasn't married to a liar. I was married to a mission. And I wasn't the destination. I was the wreckage she needed to walk through to prove a point. And the worst part? No one would believe me. Because who'd ever suspect the Pope was being slowly dismantled by his own wife? At this point, I was unraveling. Not in the way that's visible, not the shaking hands, teary eyes kind. No, this was a silent unraveling. The kind where you start questioning reality at its seams. So I did something impulsive. Something human. I followed her. She had this routine. Afternoon walks around the Namsan Trail, claiming it helped her pray with motion. Seemed poetic at first. But now I watched from a distance, dressed like one of the visiting clerics. Plain cassock, sunglasses, nothing flashy. Vatican-approved disguise. And that's when I saw her meet someone. Not a man. A woman. Early 40s, dressed like one of those New Age influencers who sells moon water and podcasts about the rise of divine feminine energy. They didn't hug. They bowed deeply. Like equals in a shared secret. I got close enough to hear fragments. The bishop in Manila is vulnerable. He'll vote your way if the pressure comes from Seoul. The Pope doesn't suspect a thing. I almost laughed out loud right there. The Pope was not only suspecting, he was stalking. They talked for 30 minutes. I recorded what I could. No names. Just roles. It was all coded, like some twisted celestial chess game. But the most chilling part came at the end when Hyojin said, "He's clinging to the idea that he can fix me. That's his weakness. He still thinks I'm his wife." That cut me deeper than anything yet. Because, God help me, she was right. I'd been telling myself this was all a crisis, a phase, a fall from grace we could repair. I'd still been making her tea. Still been asking if she'd eaten. I had been trying to save her soul while she was selling mine. When she walked off, I didn't follow. I just sat down on a bench, numb. A cardinal passed by me and nodded. He probably thought I was meditating on a sermon. Nope. Just watching my life burn from the inside out. That night, I played the audio back in the panic room. Over and over. I didn't even cry. I just stared at the blinking red light on the recorder and whispered, "This is it. I'm married to a cult strategist. You don't get prepped for this in seminary. You don't get a guidebook on how to handle your wife infiltrating your papacy through weaponized charm and spiritual lingo. You just survive it. Or try to." At this point, I knew I had two options. Go public, destroy my own credibility, spark a global scandal that would reduce the papacy to a reality show. Play her game, and beat her at it. Guess which I chose? I started moving like a man preparing for war, but dressed like a priest about to bless a soup kitchen. I reached out to a handful of people I knew I could trust, men and women whose loyalty was to God, not power. Some old, some new. Most of them had been pushed to the sidelines over the years for being too idealistic. Perfect. We called ourselves, unofficially, of course, the Lantern Circle. Corny, I know, but it fit. We were trying to shine a light on whatever underground network Hyojin was plugged into. Turns out, her little meetings in the park? Just the tip of the heretical iceberg. She had a network. Priests. Advisors. Even a media handler in Tokyo who had quietly been spinning stories about papal fatigue and a divided Vatican. Slowly shaping the narrative that I was the problem, I was cracking under the weight of tradition, reform, and global division. It was subtle, effective, diabolical. And the worst part? She was doing it all without technically breaking any rules. She never handled money, never published anything herself. She just whispered in the right ears and watched the dominoes fall. One of my lanterns, a nun with sharper instincts than any bishop I've met, found out Hyojin had been making private visits to the South Korean National Archives. Why? To research annulments. She was preparing to leave me, not divorce. Annul. In her own words, our marriage had never been valid in spirit. She had already laid the groundwork, told certain insiders that I'd pressured her into a public life she never wanted, that I used her as a modern trophy wife, that I withheld emotional intimacy. That last one really stung. Because the truth? I've been trying so hard to protect her from the madness of this role. The cameras, the scrutiny, the constant global expectations. But she twisted that into a weapon. She was going to leave me and make it look like I had spiritually abandoned her. And if she pulled it off, I'd be the first pope in modern history to have his marriage publicly annulled while in office. I'd be humiliated. And the faction she belonged to would claim the moral victory. The Holy See would fall into chaos. So I made a vow, right there in the panic room, with my hand on a cracked crucifix that had survived the Korean War. If she's going to play chess with the church, I'll be the bishop who turns into a queen. No more mercy. Next move was mine. After that letter, everything shifted, but not in the way I expected. A few days later, during one of those rare, quiet moments before morning mass, she asked to speak with me privately. No grand gestures. No dramatic accusations. Just her, sitting across from me in the papal library, eyes tired but sincere. She started by confessing something I never saw coming. I'm scared, truly scared. Not of you, but of myself. Of what I've become. Turns out, behind all the manipulation and lies, she was wrestling with a darkness she'd never shared. Feelings of inadequacy, guilt over stepping into a life she never wanted, and a growing resentment that twisted into bitterness. She admitted that the secret meetings, the sabotaging, it was her way of crying out for help, even if she didn't know how to ask. That moment hit me harder than any betrayal. It wasn't just about the papacy or the politics or the power plays. It was two broken people, trapped in roles neither of us truly understood. For the first time, I saw her not as a rival or a liar, but as someone lost, someone desperately needing grace. We didn't solve everything that day, but we started talking, honestly, and that, for me, was a start. After that confession, things between us didn't magically fix themselves, far from it. But something shifted. It was like walking on cracked ice. Every step cautious, every word measured. We agreed on a fragile truce, not a solution, but a pause in the battle. We started attending counseling sessions. Yes, even the Pope can do that. A discreet priest-therapist who understood the unique pressures we faced. It was awkward at first, like two strangers fumbling in the dark. But gradually, the walls began to thin. Hyojin opened up about her fears of losing her identity, her deep loneliness in a world spotlighted by cameras and endless expectations. I shared my own burdens. The crushing weight of leading millions, the loneliness of the office, and how I'd been blind to her suffering. Despite it all, she still had her sharp edges, that biting sarcasm and quick temper. But now, they came with cracks of vulnerability. One evening, after a particularly tense session, she muttered, "Maybe I wasn't the saint you hoped for, but I'm not the devil either." And in that flawed, honest moment, I saw the woman I married, messy, complicated, but real. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Just when I thought we might find some fragile peace, the world reminded me why my life was anything but ordinary. One morning, a major South Korean tabloid leaked a story, a fabricated one, of course, claiming that the Pope's marriage was on the rocks due to infidelities and secret alliances. The headline screamed betrayal. My name was dragged through the mud alongside hers. I knew exactly who planted it. And no, it wasn't some political rival from outside the Vatican. It was a direct hit from her network, a strategic blow meant to destabilize me. The backlash was immediate. Church officials whispered, the faithful questioned, and the media circled like vultures. I had to do a public statement, calm, composed, but firm, denying the rumors and affirming my commitment to my role and to my vows. It was humiliating, exhausting, and deeply personal. But here's the irony, the scandal brought us closer. In the eye of the storm, we found ourselves defending not just the papacy, but each other, awkwardly, imperfectly, but together. For all her flaws, for all her lies, she stood beside me that day. Not as a picture-perfect wife, but as a flawed human being weathering hell by my side. I realized then that maybe the real battle wasn't winning or losing. It was surviving together. Things couldn't stay in that uneasy balance forever. One night, after a particularly grueling meeting with Vatican officials who were clearly questioning my leadership, I came home to find Hyojin had disappeared. No note. No call. Nothing. Panic flooded me like a tidal wave. I called every number, checked her favorite places, even asked the Swiss guards to keep an eye out. But she was gone. Then, the truth hit me like a lightning bolt. She had left, but not alone. The same woman from the park. The one I'd overheard plotting behind closed doors. They had vanished together. It was betrayal on a level that felt almost cinematic. I sat in my papal chambers, overwhelmed by a cocktail of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief. The woman I'd fought to save, to understand, had chosen to disappear with someone who was clearly pulling strings against me. In that moment, I realized something painful. Some people aren't worth the fight, no matter how much you love them. I was left with a shattered heart, a broken trust, and the impossible task of picking up the pieces alone. So here I am, the man who became Pope in South Korea, now standing at a crossroads I never imagined. My wife, the woman I loved and fought for, walked away into shadows I couldn't reach. Betrayed, yes. Broken, definitely. But not defeated. What I've learned through this chaos is this. Trust your gut, but don't let bitterness blind you. I ignored early signs because I wanted to believe in us. That's human. But I also learned that self-respect is sacred. People reveal their true selves in how they handle power and pain. Hyojin chose manipulation over honesty. That's on her, not me. You can love someone and still let them go. Holding on to a lie hurts more than the truth ever could. Faith isn't about perfect people. It's about imperfect people trying to find grace. Me, her, even the church itself. We're all flawed. If you're reading this, caught in your own storm of betrayal or broken love, remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest with yourself. And sometimes, the bravest thing is walking away, not because you don't love, but because you respect yourself enough to seek peace. I'm still healing, still praying, still figuring out what comes next. But for the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm ready. Thanks for listening, strangers of the internet. It means more than you know.